contrary to Helmut, who has disappeared somewhere in the audience, I'm hamstrung with mic system, but don't see it as an allegory of independence of the ECB versus that of the Commission. I also saw that there was some ordeal on the table, but I hope it's not on our hands. I was invited to give you a few introductory remarks. Not so much on the future of payments. Helmut did that so well. I could not, compete with him. But let's say what is our immediate future as, department and the Commission dealing with payments. Our immediate future is PSD2, 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 and some say PSD3, but it's just to wake you up. Why PSD2? You'd say the co-legislator adopted it, has entered into force last year in January, but it has still to produce its effects. And what we're now working on is with member states as a priority to ensure a proper transposition of the many provisions of PSD2. Some of them are not new. They derive and have been unchanged compared to the first Payment Services Directive. But there are new provisions, notably on security of payments, accompanied by the RTS of the EBA, and also provisions on innovation, providing legal security and legitimacy to a number of new market actors that came to the fore over the last 10 years. So that requires quite some work with member states to ensure also that there will be not too many national flavors in the national law implementing PSD2. Though in our jargon, as we say, PSD2 is a maximum harmonization directive, you may still have some minute variances. So we've had already last year 4 meetings with member states on transposition, and we'll have another one this Friday. And we'll have some more in the course of this year before, indeed, PSD2 has to be applied in January 2018. So that doesn't keep us busy every day. What keeps us busy every day for the time being is more the product of a very good work of the European Banking Authority on the draft regulatory technical standard on strong customer authentication and secure communication channels, a bit of a mouthful. About 30 articles which supplement PSD2 are necessary for a proper application of some of the provisions of PSD2. And by that, I refer to the last question. PSD2 can be of application as of January 2018 for most of the provisions. It will have some effects, but it is true that one will have to wait for the actual application of the RTS to have, let's say, a complete and homogeneous environment for PSD2. And I would draw also the attention of participants that time difference was deemed necessary by many stakeholders so that they would have sufficient time to adapt their IT systems and put in place the necessary resources and investments to be in line with the concept of strong customer authentication and the interfacing between ASPSPs, let's say directly banks and fintechs. So that's where this comes from. So the co-legislators was really listening to the market, but of course, supervisors will have to deal with that time difference. Why are we so busy with the RTS? Is that because we have to adopt it in EU law through a Commission delegated regulation. And we have to do it on the basis of the work of EBA. And I don't know, we didn't have time because we are very busy to debate with Dirk. Dirk Albrecht will speak in the panel about what you intend to say, Dirk. But as a matter of fact, EBA had conducted already 2 public consultations on the RTS. And I have a feeling that I'm amidst another public consultation, though it's not public from the outset, but we meet so many stakeholders that it's almost the same. Well, I hope we won't have 200 visits, like you had more than 200 comments, Dirk. What we are working on is not only to check the, let's say, the legal compatibility of the RTS with PSD2, so whether the RTS meets the mandate, because globally, at first sight, not being a lawyer and not having yet consulted our legal service, it globally does. But though it's a very good work, we think that there may be some marginal adjustments possible to make it even better. And as you know, that RTS touches upon two main components, security of payments on one hand, and the communication interfacing between account servicing payment service providers, and from now on I would call them banks for ease of speech, and fintechs, or payment initiation service providers, or account information aggregators or service providers. On the security component, there are lots of views being expressed. Some say it doesn't go far enough. Some say it goes too far. So probably we have reached the sort of right balance. And I would say that for the time being, of course, I'm not the Commission, I'm not the college, but our assessment of the EBA approach on security is that it is a very balanced and cautious approach. Cautious because there was a wish not to unsettle the market, notably as far as remote electronic payments are concerned and e-commerce is concerned. The press, when PSD2 was adopted, went perhaps because we said that it would make a major difference in terms of security. So it was a nirvana of security thanks to PSD2. But it doesn't mean that we are starting from scratch with a new world in terms of security. It will be a progressive approach. And what testifies of this is the fact that in EBA you have a review clause that will cut in 18 months after the application of the RTS. So we'll start progressively. The RTS allows for risk-based analysis as an alternative to strong customer authentication within a well-defined environment, depending on the fraud rate PSPs do experience, depending on the monetary amounts at stake. So that's on the security side. Where we see perhaps some scope for marginal improvement is in relation to the interfacing. But it's not groundbreaking because EBA itself, in its RTS, and to give you a bit of context, the mandate is that for banks, that they have to provide at least one communication interface so that fintechs can interact and offer their services, be it payment initiation or account information aggregation. And that communication interface can be offered under two forms. On one hand, the online banking platform can be the channel of access. On the other hand, it could be a dedicated interface. And there, the RTS specifies that when it is a dedicated interface, some measures have to be put in place, some contingency measures have to be put in place to ensure that, as any IT system, you don't have necessarily 100% reliability, and also that is worth for large systems like Target. Of course, hopefully it doesn't collapse too often, but it can happen. So in case of collapse of a dedicated interface, one should have a contingent solution. And what we have in mind is to spell out that contingent solution. So that's what we are currently working on as far as PSD2 is concerned. Then, of course, luckily, we're not too sad people, and we're not only dealing with PSD2. We have the remnants of the SEPA and debt regulation, and we were mandated in the SEPA and debt regulation to report to Parliament and the Council about the effectiveness of the regulation. And so we'll come up with a report on that before summer. Globally, things are fine, doesn't require an amendment of the regulation, but requires some, let's say, better enforcement by member states because a number of payment services users are not actually reachable from accounts that are not established in their territory. Classically, it's the electricity provider, the tax authority, which accept direct debits from the territory, but not from an account located outside of the territory. And most member states do face the same difficulties. We, of course, are very active also in supporting the ECB action on instant payments and peer-to-peer mobile payments. That was not mentioned, but is also a very important project that the ECB is very active on with the Euro Retail Payment Board. And now, looking more towards the future, we released last Thursday a Consumer Finance Action Plan. Title change rather at the last minute. We used to call it the Action Plan for Retail Financial Services. And there are a number of actions, about 12 of them, many related to fintech, to e-identity, which have some bearings for the conduct of KYC in the context of anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing requirements for payment service providers in general. But also there are two measures related directly to payments. One is about expanding the regulation on European regulation on cross-border transactions to cover those let's say, EU currencies other than the euro, so that they will be brought within the scope of the regulation, so that when one will make a payment, let's say, from Romania in the local currency to Sweden or to Belgium, there will be a comparison of the cost of a cross-border transaction with the domestic transaction. And we will also examine the functioning of what is the awful acronym DCC market, the dynamic currency conversion. That is a market that has emerged over the last 20 years. Typically, you go to London to attend an EBA meeting, for instance. You spend the night in the hotel, and in the morning, when you are to pay your bill, you're asked whether you would want to pay in pounds sterling or in euro, because you come from Brussels, let's say. And if you pay in euro, that is what is called dynamic currency conversion. And the merchant, on top of the foreign exchange rate, can have a little margin. Consumer organizations complain about the fact that as a consumer, you tend to be on the losing side. We want to examine the functioning of the market. It's already covered by PSD1, but it's an issue of enforcement as to the level of transparency that can be offered. So that is something we will examine closely. I won't say much about fintechs because we just have a public consultation of fintech that opened last Thursday for 3 months. So you have plenty of time to contribute to it, and we expect that we'll beat the EBA record with the RTS on strong customer authentication and communication and secure communication channels. I think I'll stop here, and I'll thank you for your attention.